This is a new model manufacturer and a new medium for me to work in. So today we're going to have a go at an Isinglass 3D printed kit of the Great Northern Railway's Invalid Saloon. I gained a real big soft spot for this vehicle a number of years ago, so much so that I even bought the drawing in view of scratch building a model of it. I even made a special trip to the North Yorkshire Moors Railway to go and see it because it's there in preservation. Now before we start, I'm just going to explain that I don't normally do this sort of thing, but I'm feeling really devious. So this video is going to be dedicated to Mark. If you know him, you'll understand why. If you don't, it'll become apparent. There's a clue in the title. I'm also going to have to admit that I made a bit of a mistake when I bought this kit. Not that I actually bought it, but my research wasn't exactly 100% once I'd purchased it. This vehicle's seen three distinct periods in its life. When it was built in 1909, 115 years ago, at Doncaster Works, it entered service as an invalid saloon, the only one of its kind. As the plan drawing shows, it had two compartments and a sort of lounge area, two toilets, and corridor connections at each end. How long it lasted as an invalid saloon, I'm not quite sure, but sometime in the 1960s, it was converted into an engineer's saloon, losing both the corridor connections at each end and gaining observation fronts. It was withdrawn from British Railway service in about 1976 and found its way into preservation. At this stage, it was then modified again, losing one of its observation ends and gaining a corridor connection. So it ended up being lopsided, or to be more precise, lop-ended, if that's a thing. And this is where the mistake is, or is sort of, because I bought the preservation version of the kit. You'll understand more when we go to paint. So, after removing all the pieces from the sprues, cleaning them up, I then glued them all together, which was another mistake. Well, sort of. I think superglue is generally accepted to be the standard for gluing resin kits together. The difference being it's a one-shot wonder. If you get it wrong, that's it. Game over. You only get a few seconds to adjust, and then it's gone off, and then it's harder than the actual resin. Decanted onto some sort of plate and then applied with a cocktail stick is, I don't know, it's the method that everybody uses on YouTube. As with most model railway kits, there's no instructions, so I don't even know whether I'm doing this in the right order. Or just magic the last side on. It's not working. Try again. Hang on. There you go. Okay, with the sides on. Okay, with the main body now complete, can test fit the roof and the corridor connection at one end. I'm now going to have some fun with a totally inaccurate interior. Using a thin piece of styrene sheet, I think it was 20 thou, I marked off all of the partitions on the inside. Utilising the interior parts supplied in the kit, I then planned out how I wanted it all arranged. It's not totally inaccurate, I've just twisted the realms of reality just to suit what I want out of this vehicle. So according to the drawing, at one end there's a standard compartment, which is what we have, and then outside of that is a sort of kitchen type area, that's as per the plan, a toilet in the middle, and then according to the drawing there should be an open saloon area, and I'm going to call this my office. It's only a simple one, a chair, a table and an armchair. Again, according to the drawing, the next compartment should be a storage area with a curtain and not a wall, so it's similar but not 100%. And then on the end we've got the first class compartment. I'm going to do that as removing the compartment completely and one side of it, and then arranging the armchairs and double armchair, if you like, in a way that suits when it all comes together. There should be another toilet on the end, but that was removed when it was converted into a observation saloon. The kit parts were okay, but I decided to upgrade them just a little bit by buying some extra parts from Wizard Models, and those parts were additionally metal, which helped with the weight issue. Also, I thought it would enhance the look of the underframe because, like some of you, I like to run my models upside down to appreciate the underframe detail. I think that joke was lost on some people, but never mind. The final pieces of... but never mind, yeah. Okay, so the final pieces of detail added: the corridor connections, buffers, the buckeye underneath the corridor connection, extra strapping on the sole bar, footsteps, door handles, grab handles, and a coupling and hook on the end that is the observation saloon part, which must mean we're about to go to paint, which is primer, because I thought this model deserved it. That is, of course, after it spent a good while in a nice hot soapy bath to get rid of all the greasy finger marks and all the shiny filings that seem to have some sort of electrical static thing going on with this model. I'm not sure if that's common with resin kits. Like every other model making YouTuber, the priming process does many things. It unifies the look of the model. It reveals any imperfections that need to be addressed before going to full paint. And it also gives us a blank canvas for whatever paint we do decide to put on. The first coat for me is a coat of NATO black on the underframe and the lower half of the body side. Why, I hear you ask? Well, it's about what colour I'm going to paint it, and I'm going to paint the lower half a darker shade to the top. That's right, it's not going to be maroon or teak, it's going to be blue and grey, because this vehicle was one of a handful of grouping vehicles that managed to make it into the blue and grey era. As in this excellent picture that I found on Flickr, credit to David Ford. While I was painting the grey and the blue, it occurred to me that I'd made a second mistake on this project, as I mentioned earlier, because I could have literally halved all of the masking by painting it as an unassembled kit and then assembling it as a pre-painted sort of thing, if you know what I mean. The yellow on the end went on really well, and I'm not sure whether that's a new technique that I've developed or different paint that I've been using. We'll find out in a different video that I'm working on currently. Hopefully I might get that finished in the next couple of months. After it had dried out, once the paint had dried out, I went back in with some rail grey, same shade that I put for the airbrush, and just brush painted a couple of panels. Just dries in a slightly different way, gives a different tone, more visually interesting. The glazing was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, although it did take me a whole day just to do it all. I fixed it all in place with glue and glaze from Deluxe Materials. One of the first times I've ever used it, and it seems to be really good. Spending hours on interior detailing that you can't really see isn't my sort of thing, but I don't do that many coaches anyway, so it shouldn't really be that much of an issue. I think it's all about the impression of what you can see rather than the actual thing that you can see. So I didn't do very much painting at all. Brown linoleum flooring was a big thing, so I did that. I did a blue carpet in the office. I painted the toilet in a sort of greeny coloured because Shire's Lynx was the thing back then. I did paint the seats and the table, but I can't find the footage or I didn't film it. I didn't know what colour to paint the interior walls, so I just left them undercoat grey because it should allow more light in, as opposed to having a dark colour on the walls, which would absorb all the light and then not be able to see anything inside. And putting lights in isn't something that I was going to entertain either. Now here's where I'm potentially going to get into trouble, although I did have an awful lot of fun doing it. I wouldn't normally populate the internals of a coach, but for the sake of entertainment. First of all, I'll introduce you to my wife, and this figure is also representative of probably about 90% of all women who stand at the kitchen sink doing the dishes, even though we've got a dishwasher. And this next figure represents two people. One, my friend Matt, who's Welsh, and the other person it represents is another one of my friends who's like a sexual deviant. Let's call him Saunders. So collectively, this figure is called Matt Saunders. If your name is Matt Saunders, I'm not apologising at all. It's just unfortunate. And if you're Welsh, that's even funnier. The next character is the person that this video is dedicated to, Mark, hobbling about in the corridors on his crutch, trying to look busy. I suppose it would be a little unfair to poke fun at others without the ability to poke fun at myself. So the next character is me, or a representation of me, hiding in the office, being socially awkward. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but next we have Steve on the bog, stinking the whole coach out. In the observation saloon end of this coach, we've got my mother and looking after my father on the half first class compartment. For the last figure, sitting up front or at the back, or whichever orientation this thing ends up being, I've given him an emergency brake valve. No power handle, so we'll call him a wannabe driver, or his proper nickname, Kim Jong Norwich. Sorry, I was just spent the last half an hour trying to not wet myself laughing. I'll be serious, get this thing finished. Come on. Right, now that we've put them into the coach, we can hermetically seal them in by putting the roof on. To which I added some additional detail, which isn't 100% accurate, but it does align with the thing that I've created. So we've got some ventilators, water pipes, and a fan for the kitchen sort of area. I couldn't be dealing with masking up to spray the roof, so I hand painted it, which moved us on to my regular 2-colour weathering for coaches, and that is not black and brake dust. 50% paint and 50% thinner, because again, we're not changing the colour, we're just discolouring what's already there. Starting off with the brake dust, pretty much all over covering, but more heavily on the lower half. And then with the not black, Revel number 9, on the lower half only, a little bit on the roof. With a damp flat brush, we're just literally going to wipe it all off. This is my method that I normally get reasonable results with this method, and then if I'm not happy with it, I just repeat steps 1 through 3. My success with the yellow painting on the front was a little bit too successful because it ended up being a little bit too bright. So I ended up going back over it after the first weathering stage with a pin wash. This went a little bit too heavy, but with the aid of some thinners, we managed to blend it all out. You might have noticed that I haven't mentioned the bogies, and that's because when I first bought this kit, I bought it without bogies from the manufacturer because I'd already allocated a set of Bachmann bogies for the job. However, I couldn't get them to fit no matter what I did, so ended up having to resort to some old Hornby bogies, which fitted really well. I did upgrade them as much as I possibly could with some new wheel sets and brass bearing cups. I took the large coupling off the front and just left the D because it sort of worked okay. I gave them a coat of Knot Black Revel number 9. In addition to the weathering you've already seen, they also got some weathering powders and a few other little bits of enhancements just to make them less Hornby-ish. In the configuration that I've built this thing, with one corridor connection and one observation end, you'd think that I might have to have a turntable installed on the layout, but luckily I have multiple reverse curves and triangles to get away with it. In true observation saloon style, it's now being pushed by a locomotive, but this isn't probably how it'll end up being used on my railway, as it will more than likely be semi-permanently coupled to one of its cousins, a Gresley buffet, and used as the general manager's, or that's me, vehicle to and from work. And I really don't think it matters whether it's coupled at the front or at the rear of the train, because it looks flipping awesome either way